Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for joining me this week. So this week I'm going to be unpacking the EU AI Act, and some of the chapters from the Act are now in force from February 2nd. So if you would like to look at some of the highlights from the EU AI Act, then please keep on watching. Okay, so I'm using Google Notebook LM to actually unpack some of the highlights. It's 144 pages. So I admit I have not read 144 pages, but what I am going to do is when Notebook LM gives me a little summary, I can actually click in the section and I can cross-check. So I always recommend everyone cross-checking the information of any large language model. Okay, so let's just have a look. All right, we're going to have a look at the summary here. I've generated a summary. Let me move myself over. And this document actually is an overview of key themes, definitions, and regulations that are outlined in the provided excerpts from this EU AI Act. The aim of the EU AI Act is to clarify the scope, purpose, and implications of this legislation. This act aims to harmonize rules for placing AI systems on the market, putting them into service, and regulating their use, while ensuring the fundamental rights and safety are protected. So the key focus areas are the definition of AI, which is quite difficult to define because it encompasses models with growing capacities. This act also outlines prohibited practices, high-risk systems, and general purpose AI, transparency, innovation, and enforcement. Okay, so what are some of those key definitions? So the key definitions are: what is an AI system? It's defined as software that is developed with one or more techniques and approaches listed in the Annex 1, and can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, generate outputs such as content, predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing physical or virtual environments. And a key characteristic is the capability to infer, so enabling learning, reasoning, or modeling, and it operates with varying levels or autonomy. So here, let me just highlight, this is the actual definition here of AI systems. And then, of course, they give a definition of the deployer. Any natural legal person, including public authority, using an AI system under its authority, but excluding personal, non-professional use. So that includes educational institutions and all schools, of course. And they define biometric data, which we'll see the importance a little bit later, biometric identification, biometric categorization, emotion recognition system, and let me just scroll down here, public accessible space, general purpose AI system. So I think what's really interesting about this particular act is the prohibited practices. So let's look at the prohibited practices here. This is just a summary, by the way, and there's also a timeline of the different chapters in this act that will be enforced as law over the European Union. So prohibited practice, social scoring. So AI systems that evaluate or classify natural persons based on multiple data points related to social behavior leading to discriminatory outcomes are prohibited. It doesn't affect legitimate evaluation practices done in accordance with union and national law for a specific purpose. So social scoring is completely prohibited using AI tools. And this is another ban that has been outlined by the Act: real-time remote biometric identification for law enforcement. I think that's pretty important. The use of real-time remote biometric identification in public areas is generally banned, and except for a limited number of narrowly defined situations where the use is strictly necessary for substantial public use. Now, these situations include the search for victims of crime, imminent threats to life, and the identification of perpetrators of serious crimes, subject to strict conditions including prior judicial authorization. Member states can further limit or completely prohibit the use of such systems. And so they're the main prohibited practices. And then the Act actually goes on to talk about high-risk AI systems. What's the definition? High-risk AI systems are categorized based on their potential impact on fundamental rights and safety, basically. They are subject to strict requirements and obligations, and Annex 3 lists the specific areas. So I might ask Notebook LM in a moment to have a look at the Annex 3 because I'm quite interested to see high-risk AI systems. Then there is other general themes are general purpose AI models, transparency and documentation, innovation and testing, governance and enforcement, exclusions. Okay, so the AI Act does not apply to the following. This is interesting. AI systems used exclusively for military, defense, or national security purposes. So this regulation does not apply to AI systems where and insofar they are placed on the market, put into service, or used with or without modification exclusively for military, defense, or national security purposes. Okay, and also another exclusion, AI systems developed for scientific research and development. So this regulation does not apply to AI systems or AI models, including their output specifically developed and put into service for the sole purpose of scientific research and development. Other exclusions are public authorities in third countries that use AI systems with international agreements, intermediary service providers whose liability is covered by other regulation, and areas outside the scope of union law. So there is a timeline here, and the timeline states that chapters 1 and 2 are already in force from February 2nd. And then the next section, chapters 3, we've got chapters 5, 7, 12, will actually be enforced in August this year. And some other laws will be in force August 26 and August 2027. Now, let's just go to the conclusion of this, and then I'm going to jump in. I'm going to look at what was enforced February 2nd, what EU countries need to be abiding by in terms of the law, and I want to also look at Annex 3. Okay, so conclusion is the EU AI Act is a comprehensive piece of legislation designed to address the risks and opportunities associated with AI. It introduced a risk-based approach, categorizing systems based on their potential impact. It provides clear definitions, as we saw in Chapter 1, obligations and enforcement mechanisms to regulate the development, deployment, and use of AI systems, and the application of general-purpose models within the EU. It places significant importance on transparency, data protection, innovation, and the protection of fundamental rights, and is intended to ensure that AI is developed and deployed in a responsible and ethical manner. Absolutely important. Okay, so here I'm just moved myself out of the way. So here I've already asked, can you give me a summary of chapters 1 and 2 that are already in force for February 2nd, 2025. So chapter 1 here, general provisions here, subject matter and scope. So the regulation aims to establish harmonized rules for AI systems within the Union. It applies to providers who place AI systems or general purpose AI models on the market in the Union, irrespective of their location, deployers of AI systems within the Union, and also providers, deployers of AI systems located in a third country where the AI output is used in the Union. So of course, deployers includes all educational systems and schools. Chapter 1 has a few definitions which I went through before, and also there's an AI office, so the Commission's function of contributing to the implementation, monitoring, and supervision of AI systems and general purpose AI models. And AI governance is referred to as the AI office. Now, Chapter 1's enforced. Chapter 2, what is enforced? These are the prohibited AI practices. I talked about them briefly in the summary, but I thought let's go through this in detail so that we have a clear understanding of prohibited AI practices in this EU AI Act. So prohibited AI practices, here we go. AI systems that deploy subliminal techniques beyond human consciousness or exploit vulnerabilities of specific groups of persons with the intention to materially distort their behavior in a way that causes or is reasonably likely to cause harm. So that is a prohibited AI practice, the first one that's specified. Let's look at the second one. AI systems that make use of biometric categorization to infer sensitive data on a natural person, such as political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, or sexual orientation. And then the next point is AI systems that evaluate or classify natural persons based on their social behavior or personality traits, leading to detrimental treatment. Okay, the next one is the use of real-time remote biometric identification systems in publicly accessible spaces for law enforcement, with some exceptions. So the use of real-time remote biometric identification systems in publicly accessible spaces for law enforcement is prohibited unless it is explicitly authorized by a member state for specific objectives, such as the search for specific victims, the prevention of specific and imminent threats, and the location, identification, or prosecution of a perpetrator or suspect of a criminal offense. Okay, and another way that AI is banned in the EU is the use of AI systems for risk assessment of natural persons for the purpose of law enforcement, or of the use of AI systems of biometric categorization for the purpose of law enforcement. Okay, now Chapter 2 also talks about data protection, national rules, practices that are unaffected. So let's have a look. The regulation does not affect practices that are prohibited by the union law, of course, including data protection. That was the GDPR that was released a few years ago, non-discrimination, consumer protection, and competition law. And there are some member state exceptions which I thought were interesting. So Ireland and Denmark are not bound by certain rules laid down in this regulation, particularly the use of biometric categorization systems for activities in the field of police cooperation and judicial cooperation in criminal matters. So that's quite interesting. Okay, so that was Chapter 1 and 2. They are in force now in the EU, and I wanted to have a look at the Annex 3. So let me just do dictate to text. Can you please summarize Annex 3 for me? And because it hasn't picked up Annex, let me just spell that correctly. And then what is in Annex 3? That was actually outlined in terms of the high risk. Okay, so let's just go up here. Okay, so Annex 3, okay, lists the high-risk AI systems that are subject to specific requirements and obligations. So let's just have a look at them. Here is a summary. Okay, let me just scroll up. Here is a summary of the categories of AI systems included in Annex 3, as well as conditions under which they may not be considered high risk. So, biometric identification and categorization of natural persons. All right, that's been discussed before. We've got high-risk AI systems in the area of biometrics used for law enforcement. That's high risk. And it talks about migration, asylum, and border control management, or the administration of justice and democratic processes must have effective investigative and corrective powers, including the power to access all personal data being processed. Another high-risk AI system, management and operation of critical infrastructure. So that includes AI systems intended to be used as safety components in the management and operation of road traffic and the supply of water, gas, heating, and electricity. Okay, high-risk situation, education and vocational training. AI systems that determine, access, or assign individuals to educational and vocational training institutions, or that evaluate learning outcomes. There's also employment, worker management, and access to self-employment. So, of course, AI systems intended for recruitment. We don't want bias coming up. or selection of natural persons making decisions on promotion or termination of work-related contracts, task allocation, or monitoring and evaluating performance and behaviors of persons in work-related contracts. Then we have access to and enjoyment of essential private and public services. Law enforcement is high risk. And then we have let me just scroll again, migration, asylum and border control management, administration of justice and democratic processes. And then it talks about conditions for not considering an AI system listed in Annex 3 as high risk. So there's a whole list there. Okay, so I won't go through that, but I thought it was really important that we actually try and break down some of the highlights from the EU AI Act. Basically, chapters 1 and 2 are relevant now because they're already in force from February 2nd, and then we have a timeline for the other chapters. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and I hope to see you next time.